When you're testing your differential feed settings to make sure you get a nice smooth seam that does not stretch, you want to make sure you test your fabric in the direction you're going to be sewing. For most knit tops and pants, the long side seams are usually in the vertical direction, so you want to test it that way when you're getting ready to sew the side seams. And then when you go to hem, you are more likely to be sewing across the cross grain, which could have a different amount of stretch. Shoulder seams are going across the cross grain, but if you're using a stay tape that fuses to the fabric, and I recommend using a stay tape in your shoulders to keep them from stretching out of shape, then you can set your differential feed for normal or 1, and that will make quick work of sewing your shoulder seams because the stay tape will prevent the stretch from happening. So let's just test this. I'm going to fold one of my squares in half so I can test the vertical direction, and I'm going to fold my second square in half to test the crosswise direction. I'm going to stitch both of them using the normal setting, which means the front feed dogs are going at the same rate of speed as the back feed dogs. And again, I'm going to stitch both of these on end. So let's take a look at our two samples. So you can see with the direction going across the stretch, you can see that my seam has stretched out of shape. And then on the vertical direction, you can see, and I'll turn it this way, it's nice and flat and it's not stretched out. So this is a great illustration of testing the fabric in both directions to see where you need to adjust your differential feed. A seam could look ruffly when it's stretched out. It could look bowed like this. So some fabrics will actually curve like this when it's stretched out. And sometimes very subtly, it may just make the seam a little bit longer. So if it's something that you really need to have the exact length of the original seam, then measure a sample and keep adjusting your differential feed until the measurement stays the same. Here's another troubleshooting tip. Don't jack it up to the maximum setting, because if you shove the fabric in too fast, what's going to happen is you're going to end up with lots of extra fabric underneath or like between the looper threads, and it's going to look like a gnarly mess. This is interesting. You can visibly see that it's trying to gather the fabric, and you may notice that the fabric looks like it's bursting out between the looper threads. That's because there's too much fabric being pushed in and it's compacting and it's gathering up on itself. So you don't want to overshoot the differential feed setting. So you want to go to the next setting available on your serger, try it again, and keep increasing the differential feed in small increments until you get a seam that looks like this one does in the vertical direction.